During a phone conversation, Rio is asked to remain calm and listen carefully, as it concerns the tragic death of his parents. Lying in front of a truck and losing consciousness, he hears that perhaps everything happened as it was meant to be. At first, he feels neither fear of death nor relief, only a slight regret. Although he does not understand why, he also feels a bit sorry for himself, as he was supposed to turn 20 tomorrow. Suddenly, he finds himself in a wonderful new world, where exciting adventures and real magic await him. He engages in a duel with a woman and fights many battles against various enemies. But his full story will be revealed a little later, because the idea of reincarnation seems like pure fantasy to readers. But for Rio, it is all absolutely real and completely turns his life upside down. Confused, he hears a voice asking if his name is Real Amenhara. He agrees. The voice says that no one has been here for a long time and informs him that he died in an accident. The man explains that sometimes people from Earth are reincarnated after death and end up in another world. On Earth, this is called samsara, and this time, Rio is the chosen one, who still does not understand what is happening. The man offers Rio a simple choice. He can be reborn in another world and keep all his memories. Surprised, Rio compares this to the story of A Kiss of Ice, and the man agrees that it is an apt description. Pondering, Rio says he has a question for this man. At first, he asks if the man before him is God, but the man denies this and explains that from Rio's perspective, he looked like an angel. Rio calls this man to himself, the false Michael, and begins to worry whether his thoughts are being read. Next, he asks why he is being returned to this world again, and receives an answer from the angel that this is not their decision. The entity Rio calls God made the decision, but did not explain the reasons to the angel. Rio asks a third question: what should he do now in this new world, since he still feels confused? The angel calmly says that Rio can act as he sees fit, since he was not given any specific instructions. Rio believes he can choose any life he wants, so he decides to live peacefully and accepts this offer. The angel, happy that Rio agreed, begins to tell about the new world. The false Michael explains, this world is similar to Earth, but here magic exists, while gunpowder and firearms are almost non-existent. Rio is curious whether magic really exists in the new world, and learns that once it existed on Earth too, but now it is no longer used. While Rio tries to comprehend that magic once existed on Earth, the angel prepares to show him the new world. A globe appears on the screen, and it is announced that this planet is called Fire. Smiling, the angel says that every fifth person has magical abilities, and Rio will receive a talent for water magic. Rio becomes upset and asks if he can switch from water magic to fire or earth magic. Fake Michael explains that the magical abilities given to a person by the gods at birth remain unchanged for life. Rio then asks if this means he will have to possess only water magic for his entire life. With a slight smile, the angel explains that mastery of the water element is very valuable, since people cannot live without water. More than 8% of people in the New World cannot use magic at all, so Rio is truly very lucky. In fact, water and salt are very important for survival, and in the medieval world this is a great advantage, not having to worry about where to find them. Rio curiously asks Fake Michael if water magic can heal, but the angel explains that healing is only possible with light magic. They will be disappointed if they do not accept this explanation. The angel tells him about elemental magic and adds that there is also non-elemental magic, but advises Rio to focus on water magic and master it well. He says that Rio's physical attributes are better than average, and in Fea everything depends on effort, not levels or skills. When Rio asks how to become stronger physically and magically, the angel explains that both on Earth and in Fea, people become stronger through constant training and hard work. At the end, Michael encourages Rio and motivates him not to stop developing. Assured that diligent work will bring results, worried Rio realizes, without dedication, he will not survive in the new world. After further explanations, the narrator says that now it is time for the false Michael to ask about Rio's plans. With enthusiasm, Rio says that he dreams of living peacefully and far from the city. Smiling, the angel decides to send him to a new life in the Rhonda forest. Having provided food for 2 months, he added that there is a protective barrier of 100 meters around the house, and advised Rio to learn magic to hunt. He also shows a place southwest of the house where Rio can collect salt from seawater. Realizing he forgot an important question, Rio asks how to use magic. False Michael explains that one must constantly imagine magic during training, as mastery does not appear immediately. Rio promises to work hard and thanks False Michael for his support. Suddenly, he wakes up on a bed inside the airplane cabin. When he gets up, he notices that the hut looks like it is from the Middle Ages. Leaving the room, he notices a sturdy table on which lie 2 books, and nearby stand several chairs. Ignoring the books, he goes further and finds a bath in another room. It reminds him of Roman public baths, and he is glad to have his own. Suspecting that this is not true, Michael developed this considering his Japanese roots. He also wonders whether the angel has a gender at all. In a few minutes, he remembers the books, turns back and takes them in his hands. One turns out to be a guide about monsters, and the other about local plants. A note from the fake Michael informs that the food is stored in the silo tower on the street, which also serves as a freezer. This confirms that the angel could read his thoughts. The real comments say that he does not have the usual skill iskyprasal. It is worth recalling how Mikaeu warned about this, although incorrectly. He finds a knife, attaches it to his belt, and sees nothing else interesting in the cabin. Going outside, he is immediately captivated by the incredible views opening before him. Looking at the distant mountains, he wonders if dragons or monsters live there and decides to keep his distance. When he looks around, it fully dawns on him that he has truly entered another world. Meanwhile, the fake Michael thinks about how wonderful it would be to someday get a real body and live a peaceful life like Rio. Michael thinks that Rio will sooner or later understand something important, and when he looks at his screen, he notices a hidden ability and wonders where it came from. He recalls that he had seen this ability only once before, in a girl, when he just started working with reincarnation 10,000 years ago. He wonders what this repetition could mean. The screen shows that Rio's hidden ability is eternal youth. Now, having found himself in a world of magic and swords, Rio can't wait to try his new abilities. His only ability is water magic, and he remembers the advice of the fake Michael. Imagine the magic, focus, and think about water. When Rio closes his eyes and then opens them again, he cannot believe his eyes. Water bubbles are flying in the air before his raised hands. Realizing that this is his first experience using magic, he recalls the fake Michael's advice, watches a drop of water fall to the ground, and understands that no spells are needed for this. He wonders if the laws of physics in this world are the same as on Earth. He also remembers how the angels warned him that beyond this 100-meter protection, he must be ready for battle. He cannot go further unprepared. There is only enough food left in the storage for 2 months, and he only had a knife given by the fake Michael. Even on Earth, defeating a wild boar with just a knife is simply unrealistic, so imagine how it would be to fight monsters or fairies. Rio still has one more weapon while he fills the bathtub with water. He understands that the key to his magic is to imagine the desired outcome. Thinking deeply, he clearly pictures in his mind how hydrogen bonds work. Understanding how things work, he imagines them. Thanks to this, he creates a thin water lens, ice, and also knows how to boil and thaw water. Suddenly, he falls to the floor in the bathroom, completely exhausted, and realizes that his magic is completely depleted. On the 5th morning, he prepares a rabbit he found in the silo. Michael noticed that only salt remained for seasoning, and the food somehow magically stays frozen. Rio constantly improves his skills. He has learned to hunt well and fry meat to a perfect state. He also studies thick books for beginners left by the angel. While eating and reading, he thinks about how to learn to heal, make antidotes, and start a fire without a water blade. When the sun sets, he rests several times during the day. He constantly creates and melts ice to train his magical abilities. During training, he noticed that he can create ice in 5 seconds, but cannot make it fly, although his water always floats in the air during the day. Rio gathers ingredients inside the barrier and often runs long distances to become stronger and improve his magic. He prepares for hunting and in the evening trains, creates ice and evaporates water. This is how each of his days passes. And on the 13th day in Fae, he holds magical water bubbles in one hand and a spear with an ice blade tied to a stick in the other. He is confident in his magical successes. Then he thinks about what to name the new technique and settles on the name Ice Spear, although he still cannot make the ice fly. Today, he wants to find useful herbs for cleansing the body and a stone to start a fire. With determination and enthusiasm, he is ready to pursue his goals. For the first time, he steps beyond the usual. Armed with a spear, he is going southwest to the beach, although Michael says that is not true. Rio cautiously walks through the dark forest, stepping over stones and other obstacles. Having emerged from the dark forest, he freezes at the beauty of the landscape that opened before him. Before him, under the bright sun, stretches a sparkling river. Captivated by the beauty of the surrounding scenery, he approaches the river and decides to descend from the mountain he had just climbed. While descending, Rio notices something on the ground and bends down to look closer. Looking more closely, he finds quartz, exactly what he was looking for today. He is surprised at how easily he managed to find it, because now he can definitely solve the problem of lighting a fire at home. Continuing to move along the river, he decides to go northeast so that his home remains to the left. This way he will always know where his dwelling is and where to run in case of danger. While walking, he thinks about phase monsters, whether he can defeat them, but he is not confident. Recalling his second goal, to find good herbs for detox, Rio tries to remember the advice from the book. Suddenly something loudly rustles behind, and he turns around. They were surprised when they saw a small hole. The creature fiercely attacks him, and frightened Rio barely manages to react. When the board rapidly approaches, he jumps aside with his last strength to avoid its attack. To everyone on Earth, he sees the board preparing to attack again. He has not yet fully recovered from the leg injury when suddenly he notices that the boar is charging at him again. His hands touch the ground, and the path between him and the board suddenly turns into slippery ice. Suddenly, the board slips out of control and cannot stop. Rio comes up with an idea. Although he cannot make his eyes fly like spears, his current skills might be enough. When the wave moves toward him, it breaks against the huge ice spears he created. Tired, Rio falls with relief when he sees that the pierced boar is already dead. After this fight for life, he begins to eat less sillifood and relies more on the prey he hunted himself. He learns that monsters in this world use magic, and the stronger the monster, the more powerful its magic. Michael explained to him that the more he uses magic, the stronger it becomes, and monsters have been using magic since birth. Gradually, Rio learns to overcome them. His skills gradually become better and better, step by step. While they prepare a large boar carcass, behind them lies a defeated giant boar. He learns that the main difference between animals and monsters is the magic stone near the heart, which only monsters have. The boy finds out that the type of monster affects its magical abilities, and monsters from the Rhonda forest have almost destroyed all ordinary animals. Still, sometimes you can see animals that survived, for example, crocodiles or fast rabbits. Nevertheless, predatory animals remain dangerous to humans, although dealing with them is easier than with monsters. In this world, the main predators are monsters. They are stronger than everyone and also possess magic, which makes everything even more difficult. Looking at the new monster, Rio remembers that he has already read about this creature in a book. This creature is a horned bison, which easily destroys giant crocodiles and enhances its attacks with wind magic, making them deadly dangerous. Suddenly, something unexpected falls from the sky and cuts off the bison's head. Rio slowly approaches the fallen bison and says that his new water magic guillotine is really impressive. Then he notices something in the water eating the bison's head. Approaching closer, he sees how quickly this creature destroys the carcass. He understands that the blood in the water attracted a fish resembling an eel paranac. Rio diligently trained in water magic and did not miss a single lesson. He learned to control the water stream so well that he could pierce everything except magical shields. He invented a water saw, a disc that spins at high speed using water and can cut various objects. He also made ice rollers that help with manual work and processing the skins of hunted animals. Rio trained his body as persistently as his magic, because monsters can be very unpredictable. The snake's tail swiftly lunges at him at high speed. A huge snake-shaped kite appears, and he remembers that it uses wind magic to make its tail work like a sonic sword. Rio boldly looks the snake in the eyes. The snake easily cuts a nearby stone with its ultrasonic tail as if it were just a sheet of paper. Rio quickly dodges and carefully assesses the situation, preparing for a counterattack while water bubbles swirl around him. Looking at the snake, he notices that a light rain begins to drizzle on them. Rio raises her hand and intently watches every raindrop around the snake. The snake furiously lunges at him. Having finished focusing, Rio quickly waves his hand, and huge ice spears pierce the serpent, instantly killing it. The serpent's venom became safe after the rain. This rain could even withstand boiling water. But there are monsters, for example, the killer eagle. It uses wind magic and flies at supersonic speed. Rio's simple tricks no longer work on us. Rio runs at full speed, and the killer eagle does not fall behind and chases him. The eagle strikes the ground with all its might and throws Rio aside. Regaining balance, Rio attacks the enemy again with a spear from close range. He thinks he hit, but the eagle manages to jump back and dodges the blow. He barely grazed the monster near the eye, thinking that a direct hit to the eye itself would definitely have an effect. This was the strongest monster he had faced so far. He is focused on defense and believes that the counterattack saved him, but another monster may appear during the fight. The monster book by False Michael made an impression. It detailed various creatures. Rio decided there must be versions for more experienced readers, as this one resembled a beginner's guide. He was also interested in 2 special pages at the end of the book. On one page was a drawing of a dragon, and on the other Akuma, a humanoid monster. These pages were for those who aspired to be the best, but Rio did not have such dreams. He just wanted to live peacefully and was engaged in that. Exactly 1 year has passed since Rio has been living in the new world. One night, by the light of the moon, he encounters a creature that looks like a human. A year after arriving in Phi, on the lake in the northernmost part of the Rhonda forest, when the moon is almost at its zenith, a headless warrior of Dylan appears before him. Rio wonders what the headless knight is doing in the Rhonda forest and where it came from. The true power of the knight is its incredible swordsmanship, and the fact that it is not mentioned in beginner books suggests it is either not a monster or too dangerous for novices. If Dylan does not use magic, Rio also decides not to use it. However, Knight is an experienced and proud swordsman who declares that he will teach Rio even if he does not want to, and after wounding him, throws him to the ground. Rio thinks it seems strange to him that after 3 strong attacks that could have killed anyone else, he is still alive. Knight seems to turn away from him. She mounts a horse and rides away, as if expecting Rio to become stronger next time. Rhea was not sure if his strikes were harming the Knight being, as he never really landed a proper hit. His determination only grows with each day. If at first he lost almost immediately, now the fight lasted a whole hour. Rio now moves faster and can anticipate the enemy's actions in battle in advance. But when his ice sword clashes with Knight's blade, it completely shatters. Rio is stunned. He looks at the headless Knight, and then a powerful attack throws him back several meters. Lying wounded, Rial noticed that this time he managed to land at least 3 hits. As dawn approaches, the Knight freezes as if waiting for something. It draws a sword, places a hand on the blade, and the sword begins to glow brightly. The sword starts to grow, becomes bigger, and completely changes shape. The Knight hands the blade to Rio, mounts a horse, and disappears, leaving him a new weapon. Kneeling with the sword, Rio perceives it as a gift from the master to the apprentice. He decides to train even harder with his new weapon. After the encounter with the killer eagle, he realized he needed to become stronger. Now every morning, he does physical exercises for half an hour to gain muscle mass. He runs, giving his all in training magical power, and also hones his fencing skills. Thanks to the advice of the Headless Knight, he understands that it is the right hand that guides the sword. The more the left hand supports each strike, the stronger and faster he becomes. During the second clash with the killer eagle, who this time came not alone but with a partner, the first eagle lost an eye in battle, but now he will not make that mistake again. Tired of the constant attacks of the eagles, Rio already anticipated this moment. Thanks to diverse magic, he avoids the second sneaky attack. But this eagle did not expect at all that his partner would fall so quickly, and therefore decided to retreat. Ray recalls that the eagle was the first enemy who almost killed him several times. He had faced death before, but this one-eyed eagle made a completely different impression. This is their third and last encounter. The eagle now looks completely different than in previous battles. Rio notices that it is darker, bigger, and enveloped in a black aura. The eagle lunges at him, and Rio barely manages to dodge, falling to the ground. He remembers that the bird did the same during their first clash. After the strike, he is convinced this is definitely the same creature, only now it has changed. The battle flares up with new strength. Rio barely manages to defend himself, realizing how much more powerful and stronger the eagle has become. The eagle breaks his ice armor, and Rio tries to quickly restore it. Suddenly, he can no longer use magic. The eagle attacks again, and Rio barely manages to dodge, becoming more and more exhausted. Rio suspects that Ego somehow blocks his magic. The eagle screams loudly and releases a flash of lightning that strikes a large area in front of it. Avoiding the lightning, Ril loses his spear. Seeing an opportunity, the eagle attacks again. Rio draws his new sword. He thought that maybe he could channel magic through it. In the decisive duel, they lock eyes and instantly strike the eagle's weak spot, causing them to lose strength. Looking into his single eye, Rio says he understands his pain, losing a partner and an eye, but still fighting to the end. He admits that their battles made him stronger and thanks the eagle for it. He praises him for his courage and ability to change, then says it is an honor for him to deliver the final blow. Pulling the sword from his throat, he finally decides his fate. The The next day, Rio returns to the battlefield where he fought the one-eyed killer eagle. Looking at the traces of the battle, he realizes the victory was real, but feels no pride in it. Rio stands and suddenly notices something descending right in front of him, capturing all his attention. A huge dragon lands before him. It does not move and speaks to him telepathically, wondering if this is exactly how it connects with humans. The dragon adds that it has not communicated with humans for a long time and asks if Rio can hear it. Still stunned, Rio begins to hear the dragon's voice in his head. The dragon can hear and confirms that this is exactly the one before him. Rio wonders if it is telepathy and apologizes for her surprise. He tells the dragon that he can hear him now. When the dragon asks if he has seen nearby a bird that evolved from a killer eagle, Ray understands this bird is well known to her. He immediately apologizes, in case the bird was an ally of the dragon. Dryden explained, it was not a servant, it was just strange that the birds suddenly disappeared from this area. It thought that it would be logical if another dragon ate the bird, so it came down from the mountain to investigate. With a certain fear in his eyes, Rio Adnets killed the like-aged eagle killer. The dragon was surprised, but agreed upon hearing the explanation about the disappearance of this bird. The text states that this bird became the first in many centuries to appear in this forest, and raises the question of whether it could somehow dampen the magic of Rio's. Rio immediately confirms that this is indeed the case, and admits that he himself could hardly believe that he cannot use his magic. He feels that his mage rights have been violated. The dragon notices something unusual about Rio and pays attention to his sword. The dragon immediately recognizes it as the sword of the Fairy King, but Rio explains that he received this weapon from the Headless Knight at the Northern Lake. The dragon confirms that that night it was the King of Water Fairies who lives in the forest. Rio adds that he possesses water magic, and the sword saved him the day before. The dragon says that is exactly why the king singled him out, hinting that he receives magic lessons from the king. But Rio quickly denies learning magic from the Lord of the Water Fairies. Rio says he trained in fencing with the King of Water Fairies, but never saw him use magic. The dragon wonders why Rio learned swordsmanship instead of water magic from the king himself, but assumes the king probably sees some meaning in it. The dragon adds that the King of the Water Fairies probably sympathizes with Rio, as both have lived for thousands of years. Seeing the right moment, Rio asks if he can ask a few questions, and the dragon agrees. Rio begins by saying he wants to learn more about the Rhonda forest, how big it is and what kind of place it is. The dragon explains that this forest was once called Rhonda of the subcontinent, and it is so large that in size it almost equals a small continent. This place is surrounded by water on all sides, and to the north it is framed by mountains. The dragon notes that as far as he knows, Rio is the only human on the continent of Rhondo. Rio is stunned. He sought a peaceful and quiet life but did not think it would be so lonely. The dragon says in surprise that this cannot be true. He has been alone all his life and asks where Rio came from. Without hesitation, Rio explains that he was reincarnated from another world and knows that there are other people who came here the same way. Suddenly a loud roar sounds, stunning both Rio and the dragon. The dragon freezes and closes his eyes, listening carefully to the sound. While Rio stands still like a statue, the dragon prepares to leave, saying he is being called but promises they will meet again. In despair, Rio asks his name and gives his own. The dragon named Lewon advises Rio to stay away from the eastern mountains, because dragons there can attack without warning. Then he instantly takes off and reaches such a wildly high speed that he even breaks the sound barrier. Rio watches with admiration as Lewon flies forward at supersonic speed. Impressed, he says that dragons are really very strong. When the dust settles, Lewon later arrives at the place of the summons. Lewon wonders if Rio is really human, as he seems so unusual, as if he is some new or altered creature. Recalling Rio's story, Lewon admits he has never heard anything like it, and these tales greatly intrigued him. He says that even after a long life, there are still things we do not know, and he is interested to see what will happen next. Looking at his reflection in the water, Rio notices that he has not aged at all. From time to time, his hair grows out, and he trims it just like his nails, which also periodically grow out. While bathing, he notices that his height and face have not changed, so today he decides to go fishing and gather some salt. During his morning bath, he thoughtfully immerses himself in his thoughts, sitting in warm water. On the Rio beach, he notices wooden boards scattered across the sand. Then he notices something and runs there. Approaching closer, he notices that only 3 people remain on the shore after the shipwreck. Checking the first man, he finds out that he died quite a long time ago. From afar, Rio sees another man with a wooden stick pierced through his body and realizes that he can no longer be saved. Then he notices another man in armor lying on the sand nearby. Approaching closer, he sees that his right arm is seriously broken and bleeding heavily. He carefully examines the wound. He wonders if it hit an artery, since there is a lot of blood. Rio understands that if he leaves him, it will be certain death. Therefore, he decides to try to help. Focusing on the wound, he wonders whether to use his water magic. Recalling that the human body is 60% water, he decides that as a water mage, he can control blood. He carefully searches for the source of the bleeding and begins to stop it. Straining, he pours water on the wound and thus stops the bleeding. Although at first the blood still flows, it gradually slows down, and the hero feels pride that he was able to help this person. Rio lifts the man in armor from the hot sand and carries him in his arms. Soon he finds a cart in the debris and places the man inside to make it easier to transport him. Later the person woke up, surprised to find themselves in an unfamiliar place. Standing, he realizes that he is in a large house and wonders whether this house belongs to the village head. He notices his sword and armor on the right, standing leaning against the wall. Going outside, he sees Rio with a fire pit, approaches, introduces himself as Abel, and asks if it was Rio who saved him, then thanks him for saving his life. Rio does not give this any importance and says that he just brought Abel home because he found him on the beach. He adds that he could only save one of the three men, and Abel calms him down by telling him that they were smugglers. Rio stops, looks at Abel, and asks if they really were smugglers. Rio suspects that Abel might have been a smuggler too because they were together, but he doubts it since Abel does not seem like a bad person. He thoughtfully notices that they communicate easily, realizes that probably Abel does not speak Japanese, and thanks the fake Michael for them being able to understand each other. Smiling, Rio introduces himself to Abel and offers him food, thinking that he must be hungry. Abel is still shaking from shock, and Rio tells him that his clothes are probably already dry. On the beach, Rio shows Abel where the other two men were and wonders where their bodies went. He tells Abel that he was very lucky to survive. Abel asks Rio to speak more simply. Rio replies that he usually talks like that with elders, but Abel prefers a friendly, casual tone. In silence, Rio thinks that maybe Faye became his first true friend, and Abel reflects on whether the ship's cargo sank or disappeared. Abel suggests that everything might already be in someone's belly, and he can no longer change anything. He thinks about Rio, but says that what he is looking for is no longer on the shore. He explains that he needs to get to the city to send a message to his friends. Rio, who is not familiar with the city, assumes that it is to the north and warns Abel that the road will be long. Rio tells Abel that there are no cities or people nearby, but Abel insists that he must set out on the journey anyway. Abel turns to Rio and asks if he wants to join him. After a short pause, when Rio does not respond, Abel waves his hand in front of his eyes to attract attention. Later in Rio's cabin, Abel apologizes for his sharpness and explains that the job is to be a guide. He adds that he will help Rio and pay him if he wants to try city life. Nervous, Abel asks what Rio thinks. Raver agrees but says he can only leave the next morning because he still has to finish his affairs. Abel is very happy and thanks Rava for agreeing to go together. After they wash the dishes after dinner, Rio tells April that he will go out for a short time and return soon. When Abel asks where Rio is going late at night, he, leaving the cabin, says he has to warn someone about his absence and asks to wait because it may take some time. While Abel answers, the scene changes. On a night road stands a headless rider, and nearby waits a horse for Rio. Rio announces that tomorrow he leaves the forest, so today is their last training before his return. The night quiets down while Rio lifts the wound he received. Rio points a weapon at the warrior and prepares for battle. He tells himself that this time everything will be different and asks the opponent to attack with full force. Meanwhile, by candlelight, Abel wonders who Rio went to, since no one appeared nearby. He thinks that Rio is alone now, maybe came to someone's grave, but decides not to ask unnecessary questions. Rio does not know where the Sea of the Moon is, but remembered that it is far to the north and wonders himself why he said that. He understands that traveling alone will be difficult, especially if you do not know how big the forest is. So Abel concludes, Rio is a wizard without a staff, probably not very strong in battle, so he wants to help him find clothes and other necessary things in the city. All sweaty and tired, Rio breathes heavily, his sword stuck in the ground after training with the headless knight. He does not notice how someone is handing him something in the dark. Rio wonders what it is, but the proud knight remains silent. Later, Abel says he does not want to be rude, and if Rio does not want to, he may not respond. Abel is curious where Rio went last night and Rio says he went to his mentor to inform about the upcoming trip. He shows Abel a new hooded cloak, a farewell gift. Abel asks if the cloak has any special properties, but Rio honestly admits that he does not know. Then they set off together to the forest, beginning their journey. Lansing returns to his little house, and Rio silently says goodbye to him with an impassive expression. They move north all morning and do not encounter a single monster. But by midday, they encounter a small wave. Abel quickly draws his sword and lunges forward, striking the monster accurately. The warrior instantly attacks the wild boar and finishes the fight in a few seconds. Surprised, our hero opened his eyes wide and looked attentively at the warrior, noticing that he was somewhat doubtful. Then Reel explained, when Abel uses combat skills, some parts of his body begin to glow and his movements change. The warrior noted that such skills are characteristic of those who are adept at using weapons. He suggested focusing on finding a convenient place for the camp, as it was already beginning to get dark. They remembered the big tree with a hollow they had passed earlier. They could hide there. Setting up camp in this tree, they would be able to calmly prepare and eat the hunted boar. Abel said that he wants to rest first, but advised our hero to wait if it will be necessary. While everyone was resting, Rio sat thoughtfully in the camp and decided to practice his magical abilities, as free time had finally appeared. The night was becoming quieter and darker with each passing hour. Later, Abel woke up and told his heroine to rest, while he stayed to keep watch. While they were gargling their throats, they managed to see the rabbit that our hero caught. I doubt Rio's hunting methods, but I admit they really work. Watching how Rio truly rests, Abel was sure that the boy's cloak was not made by humans, and he pondered about his mentor. He thought that the teacher Rio might be some kind of spirit, but spirits do not give cloaks. It had to be some legendary creature, possibly a dragon, since the cloak was definitely not made by humans. Trembling from the cold, trying to dismiss a brief thought. Soon our hero woke up, warmly greeted Abel, and they set off on the road again. Abel walked ahead with his sword ready, and Rio walked behind, carefully examining the plants around. Suddenly something fell from the sky with a loud crash to the right of Abel, and both were frightened. Abel raised his sword, feeling that an invisible enemy was hiding nearby. Raising their heads, they saw that it was a giant predatory eagle. Our hero warned Abel that this bird can strike from a distance using air magic. The warrior suggested retreating, but Rio said that a boar was chasing them from behind, and ahead was some unknown animal, so escape was impossible. They began to suspect they had fallen into a trap. But our hero insisted that it was a simple coincidence. He noted that the open field was just the eagle's hunting ground. Rio suggested fighting in the clearing. He would take on the predatory eagle and Abel the wild boar. Worried, he warned that the eagle's strikes from the air could kill even an experienced warrior if not careful. Our hero and the ice mage said that his main strength was defense, and noted that warriors find it difficult to fight flying enemies. He confidently agreed, stepped forward, and prepared for battle. Running forward, he shouted to Rio that he would return after defeating the boar and asked him to stay alive. Our hero advises to stay calm to avoid injuries, then quickly rushes at the boar, wondering how Rio managed to drive this animal away from such a distance. Burr lifts the nearest stones and launches a magical stone hail at Abel. Using a combat technique, Abel deftly dodges each attack. When he got close enough, he struck the boar with his sword. After that, he pulled the blade out of the fallen creature's body. Exhausted, he dropped to his knees, stuck the sword into the ground, and breathed heavily. He realized he was using up his skills too quickly, and Fatty was pressing him hard. Still, he understood he had to recover quickly to help Rio. Taking the boar's body, he hurried to where Rio was fighting the killer eagle. Hebel saw the defeated predatory bird, and next to it stood Rio with a satisfied smile. The warrior looked at Rio in surprise and asked if he really defeated the monster. Rio smiled and confirmed that he did, adding that other monsters ahead had fled. Abel dropped to his knees, amazed, and Rio asked if he was injured. Examining the battlefield, Abel was convinced that Rio was fine, he was just tired. He quickly asked how Rio managed to avoid the killer eagle's attacks. He noted that avoiding attacks with invisible air magic, relying only on sight, was almost impossible. Meanwhile, Rio, curious, asked permission to return and look at him. Abel turned to Rio. The warrior felt and touched a barely noticeable icy wall. Rio explained that the barrier was almost invisible, and this could be agreed upon. It was indeed almost unseen. Abel realized that the fierce eagle had defeated himself by crashing into the almost invisible icy wall. He said he knew many air, fire, and earth mages, but recalled one old man who said that water mages do not fight. Now he understood that this was not true. Smiling, Rio asked Abel what that meant. Abel immediately replied that it meant nothing, he was just talking to himself. Both looked around at the mountain, hearing strange and eerie sounds. They decided to choose either the left or the right path to get out of the mountains. Abel admitted that both paths seemed troubling to him. So he took out a coin and suggested deciding everything by luck. Heads meant going left, tails right. Rio had not yet answered when Abel already tossed the coin. It landed heads, so they took the left path. Abel noticed that Rio was acting strangely and asked if everything was okay with the coin. Rio admitted that he had never seen money before. He asked for permission to examine the coin more closely, and Abel agreed. Abel explained that in their world the economy was based on coins, and Rio compared this to Earth's economy in the 19th century, asking how many countries existed there. Abel recalled 3 main states: the Kingdom of Knightly, the Empire of V, and the Federation of Handel. During the conversation, Abel felt something strange nearby. He sadly noted that they were in a nest made of stone and gold. Then Rio was surprised that he did not know about the nests of the Goblins. Abel explained that a nest was simply a place where many Goblins gathered. Rio asked if the Goblins should not have limbs similar to humans. Counting, Abel said there were 12 Goblins here, and running away now was a bad idea. Rio asked Abel if he could try out a new magical attack, and he agreed. Rio stretched out his hand and focused on his spell. Suddenly, 10 huge ice walls crashed down on all the Golems, and it sounded like a real earthquake. With a cheerful smile, he quickly showed that this was a real weapon of mass destruction. They cleared the area and saw a large dark yellow magical stone. They noted that the value of such stones depends on their size and color. Rio called this stone a nice trophy from the battle and told Abel that he could keep it for himself. Abel, although a bit doubtful, agreed to keep the magical stone as a prize. Meanwhile, Rio realized that his way of defeating the Goblins did not work as he had expected. Abel admitted that without Rio they could have died, since he didn't even know about collecting magical stones, which Rio confirmed. After some time, Rio noticed something to the right and asked Abel what it was. Rio remarked that this creature looked like a huge hippopotamus, immediately recognized it as a giant, and jokingly asked if they should hunt it. Rio calculated that this monster was too big, even for his 10 ice walls, and Abel agreed, warning him not to try anything. Rio became serious and asked Abel if he thought he was crazy. Abel instantly replied yes. Then Rio noticed something in the distance. He saw some objects approaching them and thought they might be dragons. When they got closer, both realized that these were not dragons, but weapons. They quickly realized that wyverns were not flying at them. Wyverns were attacking the behemoth. Rio was delighted because he would finally be able to see a monster fight. He noticed that the giant was outnumbered. 6 wyverns were attacking him. One of them screamed and released a sharp gust of wind directly at the giant's side. Both heroes, struck by the onslaught of the winged monsters, waited with interest to see how the giant would respond. The giant stood still and used stone magic to create huge boulders around himself, forming a defense. The wyvern's wind attack hit one of these stones, and it completely stopped it. The flying creatures attacked again with aerial strikes, but the giant hid behind the stone wall and remained unharmed. After that, the giant created huge stone walls around himself for protection. Both the heroes and the wyverns gaped in surprise. It was impressive to watch the tall barriers around the giant creature. Abel said he had heard about giants but did not know they could use magic. Rio thought there would be a fight, but definitely not a magical one. The wave went around the walls and roared loudly. The huge monster smashed its barriers and looked fiercely at the wyverns. Suddenly, the wyverns and the heroes noticed something strange. The wyverns seemed to have lost the ability to fly and began falling near the giant. Abel asked Rio in surprise if the beast had paralyzed them, but Rio doubted it. The giant roared again, the ground shook, and the wyverns panicked, unable to take off. Rio understood what was happening and suggested that it was magic neutralization. Abel was amazed and asked if that was even possible, since he did not know any person capable of that, let alone monsters. Rio urged him to look more closely. He showed that the wyverns were trying to rise but could not. It was not paralysis, because then they would not be able to move at all. Abel tried to look away, but remembered hearing about similar traps and dungeons. Rio became worried when he heard about the dungeons and asked if there were rooms with magic protection in the Kingdom of the Mighty. Abel explained that the dungeons are located in the Western Province, not in the kingdom itself. While the giant trampled on the fallen patterns, Abel asked Rio if he was interested in dungeons. Rio enthusiastically replied that yes, he was very interested. Abel asked if the giant had already dealt with the wyverns, then noticed that Rio was lucky because Lyon had the only dungeon in the central provinces. Rhea said that Abel should have mentioned this earlier. But Abel replied that he had no idea Rio was so fascinated by dungeons. They went further, discussing the terrible battle with the monster and imagining how Abel would fight Bijima. They saw how the wyvern eats the boar instead of getting caught in the trap. He adjusted his hands. He focused his magic, and huge ice blocks rained down from the sky, pinning the wyvern and pressing it to the ground, while Abel quickly approached its head. During the conversation, Rio suggested hunting animals because they had almost no food left. A small ice arrow hit a rabbit and pinned it to the rock. They began setting ambushes for other scattered wyverns. After defeating another one, Rio felt that hunting them had become easier, and even admitted himself that he was still amazed at how simple it was. Rio cut the meat and said that he only needed to dry it before they moved on. He suggested walking along the nearby path, but Abel, being cautious, warned him to be alert. As soon as Abel finished speaking, they both looked to the left and saw a huge creature resembling a ripon, which was staring intently at them. They noticed that the griffin was carefully watching the rabbit meat tied to Rio's belt. Rio threw a piece to the beast, and it ate it eagerly. Rio noticed that this seemed like a beginning. The cheerful griffin jumped up and quickly threw the rabbit from the belt to the beast. It grabbed the prey and flew away. Rio pointed to the road behind the place where the griffin stood. Abel noticed the signpost and made sure it was a road. He called Rio to follow him. The Ural Mountains, located south of the central province, were considered impassable even for experienced travelers. Long ago, this path had a different name, which no one remembers anymore. Now these mountains are called Evil because orcs and ogres settled there, and they became very famous because of this. Abel sighed with relief, happy that they managed to pass the mountains and reach civilization. Rio asked if Abel was an experienced adventurer with a rank. Abel confirmed, but he became curious why Rio was asking. Rio admitted that he was not sure whether to join the Adventurers Guild. Abel explained that it exempts from tolls and city taxes. He added that the guild card is an identity document, allowing free entry to the city and purchasing goods at a better price. Rio said that was exactly what he wanted to hear. Abel added that the guild protects adventurers, their belongings, and earned money. He explained that carrying all one's wealth is too dangerous. Stunned, genuine like gold, and all this for banks. In the city with tall buildings, he held a booklet and a small pouch in his hands, recalling the questions he had recently asked acquaintances. For example, whether he could withdraw money at other guild branches. Abel knew how it worked only in the central provinces. But he noted that the guild is an independent organization in each country. Abel explained that during wartime, states can hire the guild and adventurers as mercenaries. Rio thought that it was cheaper than sending entire armies. Abel said that adventurers themselves decide whether to take such tasks or not. He admitted that he fears an enemy who could take everything from him, and then he would have to fight. Rio was outraged and asked how governments could allow the guild to hold their money hostage. Pointing ahead, he noticed a city in the distance. Abel was almost certain that it was the city of Calamity, so they had entered the kingdom of Nightly. He explained that Kalidi is the southeasternmost city of the kingdom. After another day through Eastern Ratu, they would reach Luna, Abel's last stop. Abel advised Rio to register as an adventurer specifically in Luna, not in Calamitas. This raised a question in Rio, why so? Abel said that Lum is the largest border city of the kingdom, where people from different places gather because of its special dungeon. He added that if Rio made Luna her base, she would feel more confident, since in cities local adventurers are often given various privileges. Rio agreed that it was logical, but noted that she did not have an entry card. Abel said that it was not a problem. As a rank B adventurer, he could sponsor Rio for just 1 silver coin. Rio sincerely thanked Abel and respectfully folded her hands. Abel said that everything was fine and suggested spending the night in Kaledi so that Rio could try the local food. At the Rio restaurant, he tasted a curry-like dish with rice and was impressed by its flavor. He kept ordering new portions of curry and various dishes, eating and exploring the city almost all night. Rio asked Abel if the Lun eat curry twice, and Abel confirmed that it is a common dish in the southern regions of the kingdom. Rio promised to cook curry again when he returns to the Rhonda forest. The next day, walking around the city, Rio asked Abel if people live beyond its borders. Abel confirmed that farmers often do so, although they once lived inside themselves. He noticed that in Lun the gates remain open even at night, unlike in Kalidi, where there are fewer patrols. This made Rio wonder if it is safe here in Lun. Abel believed that the size of Lun's and its history provide it with security. Near the gates of Lun, Gardy greeted Abel by name, but said that his companion needed to pay a toll. Abel offered to pay. He began searching his wallet for the required amount. Abel suggested heading straight to The guild asked if Rio really wanted to register. Rio confidently replied that he wanted to try the life of an adventurer, and Abel added that with him Rio could apply for a rank promotion. It is explained that adventurers usually start at F rank, but if they have a sponsor with B rank or higher, they can be taken immediately at E or even D rank. Rio asked what advantages rank D provides. Abel explained that with this rank, one can take on better tasks and receive higher rewards. Then Rio inquired whether wyvern magic stones were valuable. Abel replied that they are very valuable because wyverns are tough opponents. He added that these items are very rare and almost priceless, and the sale of Rio's treasures could affect the entire market. In the Adventurers Guild, Abel reassured Rio, saying the guild would handle it, so he shouldn't worry. When they entered, the young woman asked if it was really Abel, and the man beside her looked simply shocked to meet him. The great warrior behind them could not believe that Abel was alive. The narrator said that adventurers with rank B are rare, and that was the rank of Abel, who led the Red Sword Group. His team included Rhea the Priestess, Vorn the Shield Bearer, and Lind the Mage. Rapuz realized that befriending Abel was very advantageous because everyone respected and admired him. Abel put his hands on Rio's shoulders and introduced him to everyone as the person who saved his life and helped him return home. Abel said that Rio would join their group. He would register as an adventurer. Abel asked everyone to treat the new comrade well. The group greeted Rio with kind smiles. Rio introduced himself and said he was glad to meet everyone. One man thanked Rio for saving Abel, and another expressed hope to get to know him better. Abel asked a woman named Nine to register Rio because he wanted to recommend him for D rank. Nadia said she would manage, but she needs proof that Rio really deserves rank D. Abel, anticipating this, thought that now they might meet with the guildmaster, and Nine considered that it was real. While they were walking, one of them said that the guildmaster had spent the whole day in his office with papers and was not in the best mood. She promised to inform him of their arrival and asked them to wait in the lounge. It will rest on the sofa, and Rio will stand, waiting to be called. Suddenly someone shouted loudly and asked what was being talked about. A man entered the room, his footsteps heard from afar. He fell to his knees with relief upon seeing Abel. Abel apologized for making everyone worry but assured that he was fine. The guild leader admitted that he had almost lost hope of finding Abel when he disappeared. Mastering himself, he asked about the mage, and Abel pointed to Rio, saying that it was thanks to him that he remained alive. The man introduced himself as Human Glass, guildmaster of Looney, and thanked Rio for saving Abel. Rio replied that he had simply met the warrior by chance on his way. Having told the guildmaster that Rio wants to become its member, and he is ready to recommend him for a rank promotion, the guild leader noted that Abel's recommendation needs to be verified for this. Nain added that this was exactly why Abel wanted to meet with the head of the guild. She apologized and said she would be at the reception if needed again. When she came out, the guildmaster comfortably sat in the chair and said that he first wanted to ask a few questions. Abel stepped forward and said that Rio was stronger than him. Rio was surprised and asked if it was really necessary to say that. The head of the guild was clearly struck by Abel's words. Abel continued to say that Rio may act like a clown, but he takes his work seriously, and pointed to the magical stones on the table that they had collected from defeated monsters. Abel showed everyone the size and color of the stone. The guild leader was surprised and recognized them as magical stones with properties due to their green tint, but for now refrained from further comments. He noticed their large size and dark color, asking if they were from the Waverings. Abel confirmed and added that there were as many stones in Rio as he had. In shock, the guild leader asked how they managed to encounter so many wyverns near the city, since it would take everyone to repel such an attack. Abel Condemn explained that they were hunting wyverns south of the Dark Mountains. The master asked why they were here, and Abel explained that their ship had crashed. They ended up on the shore, crossed the land to the mountains, and there found a weaver's nest. The guild leader asked if Abel could use his connections to sell the stones without flooding the market, and Abel shyly confirmed that he could. He said he could sell them to various buyers, even royal persons, and get the money in just a couple of days. He suggested splitting the profit equally, but Abel insisted on taking 40% for himself and giving Rio 60%. Rio wanted an equal share, but Abel explained that he owed Rio for saving his life and helping him return home. Rio wanted to object, but the guildmaster warned him that refusing the split would offend Abel. Reluctantly, Rio agreed to the terms. He gets 60% and Abel keeps 40%. At the reception, Nine addressed a busy person and asked to wait a little. In the corridor, the administrator shouted for someone to stop because the issue was not yet resolved. Rio noticed something strange near the hall doors. A girl entered, stunned. Her legs were trembling, and tears were in her eyes when she saw Abel alive. Smiling, Abel apologized to Lin for making her worry. A priestess and a tall warrior entered the room, and Abel greeted them, announcing that he had returned. The priest welcomed him gladly and emotionally, congratulating him on his return. The guild head stood up and said that many matters needed to be discussed, and also informed Nine and Rio that all the documents were in his office. In the guild office, the guildmaster offered Rio a seat and asked Nine to bring the documents for registering Rio as an adventurer. Rio hesitated and asked if he could really be at level D, and the master assured him that it was normal. He asked who wouldn't believe in the power of the magical stones they brought. Rio, a little embarrassed, clarified that the decisive blows were not dealt by him, but by Abel. The guild leader acknowledged Abel's skill, but noted that no warrior, even very skilled, could single-handedly defeat a weaver. It was Rio's strength that helped Abel achieve victories. So Rio rightfully received rank D. The guild leader jokingly lightly pushed Rio, surprised by his physical condition for a mage. Rio explained that he does sports for solo hunting, just in case magic runs out or he has to run away. The guild leader understood and thought it would be good if more young people thought the same way. Soon there was a knock on the office door, and the guild master invited the visitor in. Nain entered with a tool resembling a crystal ball and explained that it was needed for registration. The guild master thanked her, handed over the necessary documents, and asked Rio to follow all of Nain's instructions so that everything would go quickly and smoothly. Nain introduced herself to Rio, saying that she works at the Lund's Adventures Guild. Rio said he was pleased to meet her and thanked her for her kindness. Sitting opposite, Nain said she needed basic information and asked Rio to answer a few questions. She asked him to state his name, occupation, and professional characteristics. Rio answered all questions correctly except the one about his place of residence. Embarrassed, Rio admitted that he did not yet have housing because he had just arrived in Lund. Nain explained that after registration, he could live in the guild dormitory for up to 300 days. This time should be enough to settle in. She added that dormitories help newcomers get acquainted and find friends. If he wants, Rio can leave anytime during these 300 days. Taking the paper given to him by the ninth, Rio marveled pondered the riddles, noticing that there were no printers, but many copies were made, and they were of very high quality. The ninth asked if Rio had ever been in the dungeon. He refused. Then she told him about the monthly guild seminar on dungeon crawling and about various free courses and classes for beginners. Nain suggested attending a seminar about dungeons, and Rio gladly agreed. Smiling at his excitement, Nain said the seminar would start the day after tomorrow. She explained that the training would last 5 days, each time there would be a different topic, and advised him to attend all the sessions. She offered to fill out the form for him, and said to be at 9 in the morning on the 3rd floor of the guild. Rio wondered if the local units of time matched the earthly ones. Nain advised her to look at the tower in the square, which rang at a certain time, for example, at 9 in the morning, confirming that the time here is the same as on Earth. She said that the interview was over and only registration remained, which is why Rio asked what that meant. Nave pointed at the crystal ball and asked Rio to place his hand on it. Rio obeyed, and then the voice announced that he was registered. The nine, smiling, asked him to remove his hand and thanked him. One of them handed him a guild card, warning that losing or damaging it would cost 1 gold coin, and sincerely thanked him. Examining the card, Rio wondered if it was possible to earn points somehow. A group of adventurers entered the guildmaster's office a few minutes earlier, all of them smiling. Abel thanked the host for allowing him to use the lounge and said that they were already leaving. Lin announced that the party in honor of Abel's return would take place at 6 in the evening at the Golden Wave, and invited Nine and Rio. Abel told Rio that he must come because he would be the guest of honor. Rio looked confusedly at the company, but Abel explained that the Golden Road was their usual route and booked a room for Rio so he could drink peacefully. Abel insisted that Rio had no right to refuse the invitation. The voice confirmed that the registration was complete and asked if Rio had any questions. Abel and Iger offered to help answer any questions and urged Rio to move on. The priestess said she had already prepared the hotel, and Abel, jokingly, told the guildmaster that he was taking Rio with him. Rio thanked Nine and the guild head for their help. Naina officially called him an adventurer and said she was returning to the reception, and he thanked her once again. When everyone dispersed, Guildmaster Nelt happily said he almost cried. He recalled how restless everything became when Abel disappeared and thanked fate for his safe return. The guild leader still could not believe that Abel survived in the dangerous mountains after the shipwreck and thought about how terrifying it must have been for him there. He decided that Abel no longer needed to investigate smuggling and promised not to assign him any more tasks related to water or the sea. In his thoughts, he thanked Rio once again for bringing Abel back alive because he could not imagine what he would have done otherwise. Approaching the cabinet filled with books, the guildmaster decided that someone needed to be warned for safety. He took from the shelf a device resembling a telephone. Meanwhile, Rio and Abel are walking through the streets of Luna, and Abel promises to repay Rio for the rescue by buying him new clothes and a staff. Abel assumed that Rio might like his leather clothes and sandals, but promised to choose something closer to his own style. Rio replied that Abel need not worry. He himself understands that a leather headband is not for the city. He was not attached to his things found in the forest and would gladly wear whatever Abel offered. Abel told Rio that he could choose both casual and festive clothes. While they were walking, Rio asked why he needed a stick if he was just buying clothes. They wonder whether mages need such permission. From the Rio fitting room, he said he did not need a magic wand. Abel noted that wands enhance spells and wondered how much stronger Rio would become with one. But Rio, still changing clothes, replied that he did not intend to use a wand and mainly relied on his sword in close combat. Surprised, Abel asked whether Rio really knew how to wield a sword or if he just meant his club, not a real weapon. Rio wondered if he had already discussed this with Abel. He remembered how he was a wind mage, throwing himself at enemies, hinting that he used a sword when leaving the shop. Abel asked again if Rio needed a staff, and Rio confirmed that he did not. Rio said that he wouldn't know how to use a staff, and he already had a sword. Abel agreed, but noted that Rio's weapon did not look like a real sword at all. Rio, confused, took out his weapon and assured that it was a sword. Abel was surprised and asked if Rio really called it a sword because he thought it was an ordinary dagger. Rio said that the real problem was that he knew little about the world. Abel asked why, and Rio admitted that he didn't even know basic things, for example, what measures exist or how long a day lasts. Abel replied that he had always considered Rio strange, but did not suspect that he didn't know things common to everyone. He said, if you understand that you know nothing, that is already wisdom. Admitting your gaps in knowledge is useful, and it allows you to begin to understand how the world is arranged. I advise Rio not to try to remember everything at once. However, Rio handled it so easily that suspicions arose, could he be a genius? Abel suggested moving on, since they had already approached the tavern Golden Wave, and warned Rio that he was not yet ready for drinking. The next morning in Luni, Rio and woke hungover. He had a headache, and he remembered that yesterday someone had carried him to the room. Rio suffered from a hangover and recalled all the pranks of friends, which is why he felt so bad in the morning. In the tavern, everyone was happy, raising mugs, and sincerely celebrating Abel's happy return. Rio turned on the drink, laughed, and praised the tasty drinks and perfect food. Climbing the stairs, Rio remembered an old poem about how tall grass survives even when the strongest warriors dream. Sitting in the common hall of the tavern, Rio lowered his head. He still felt hungover. A woman named Lenny passed by, greeted him, and said that breakfast would be ready soon, offering him to sit wherever he was comfortable. Rio thanked her and approached to ask one more question. He asked about the bill for the previous night, mentioning that he had moved into the guild housing, but Lenny assured him that Abel had already paid everything. Rio was surprised and thought about Abel's generosity. In her opinion, people who pay for others are truly special people. Soon he visited the main office of the Adventurers Guild and told Nine that he would like to take advantage of the housing offer. Nine greeted him warmly and asked how she could help when Rio showed interest in learning more about the guild dormitory. Nine explained that about 30 people currently live here, although some of them are now in the dungeon, and not everyone comes every day, but it is still quite crowded here. She explained that 6 people live in each room, and there is one common area for everyone. Since no one else was waiting, she offered to give him a tour. Walking together, she hoped that he enjoyed the party and noticed that everyone remained in a good mood. Rio admitted that he had drunk too much, and Nine advised him to buy a detox potion at the guild shop to cure his hangover. This surprised Rio because he did not even know that potions could do that. He asked about the living rules, and 9 people responded that residents can freely come and go, have access to rooms, shared bathrooms, and kitchen. Also, 9 people added that there are no caretakers among the residents, and everyone keeps order themselves. Among those surveyed, 9 people said that they had indeed seen real, cool mentors, and added that it is a long story. Now only cleaning has been outsourced. She said that the former adventurer now owns a cleaning company in Luni, and Rio joked that this is probably what all adventurers do after retirement. Nain told Rio that he would live in room number 10 together with Nils and Edo, who were currently in the dungeon. In room 10, 9 pointed to the nameplates on the doors and said that his was already ready, so he would hang it up. Rio hesitated but still agreed and watched as 9 hung the nameplate with his name by the door. There were already 3 nameplates of the residents of this room hanging on the door, with space left for 2 more. No one came up from below or entered loudly. 9 peeked out and made sure both were there. She left the room together with Rio, smiling and introducing herself as a guild employee. It was announced that Nils and Edo had returned. The shirtless boy, embarrassed, greeted the 9 who had returned. 9 said the timing was perfect because she was just about to introduce Rio. She asked everyone to take care of him. Rio greeted them, but the girl looked not very pleased with the new neighbor. The boy quickly introduced himself as Nils and pointed to the girl, saying that this was Edo. Both gladly met Rio. At that moment, 9 said she was returning to the reception and reminded Rio not to be late for tomorrow's seminar, adding that it would not be difficult because he would be resting here. When the 9th person left, Nils was putting on a shirt, and Edo was looking sternly at him, still not dressed. Nils said that Nis 9 looked simply wonderful. Edo advised him not to worry, noting that everyone liked administrators. But he had no chance. Offended, Nils said that every man dreamed of getting married after gaining fame in the game. Edo replied that such women were only suitable for nobility, not for ordinary adventurers. Meanwhile, Edo suggested that Rio become their roommate. She admitted that she was a little worried about who would join them. Everyone understood that the arrival of a new person was inevitable, and everyone was glad it was Rio. Nils agreed, adding that he would not want to live with someone like Den from the first room at all. Rio is a bit nervous because he understands that different personalities can lead to conflicts. Nils said that he is a fencer and Edo is a priestess, then asked about Rio, assuming that he is probably a mage. Looking at Nell, Rio was convinced that he is a true mage. Nils said that he heard the seminar being discussed and asked if Rio would attend it. Rio replied that she was going to attend all 5 days, then Nils added that this seminar saved his life. Later, they approached the door of room number 10, and 9 people entered together with a newcomer who was to live in the dormitory. The boy introduced himself as an adult man. Nils stepped forward, greeted, and introduced himself, also saying that Rio and Edo were with him. 9 told them that another man would also come to the seminar, suggested that he and Rio go together, then said goodbye and left. Nils, impressed, admired 9's beauty. Edo, who was a man, noted that 9 looked very young and asked if he was already an adult. The man admitted that he was 16 years old, and after the death of his family, he became an adventurer to survive. Nil noted that they all found themselves in similar circumstances, and he liked that this man and Rio ended up at the same seminar. Rio told the man that during these 5 days, they would learn a lot of new things, and Nils and Edo said that they were returning to the dungeon and wished them luck at the seminar. Elsewhere, Lin was shouting at Abel, claiming that it was impossible. Abel replied that he did not like bringing bad news, but it was actually possible. Lin said that she knew the ice wall spell, but assured that creating it in the air so that it would fall on enemies was impossible. She explained that no element allows creating magical effects at a distance. They appear only near the mage himself. Len's II companion said that she was exaggerating and believed Abel's words. Lin addressed her, insisting that her logic was correct, and accused her of supporting Abel out of sympathy. Rhea agreed, noting that even light mages can only heal those nearby, so long-distance healing would be very useful. Abel insisted that he was just telling how everything happened, and how they got the yellow magic stone from the ghoul. His companion Stone asked what he was going to do with such a big stone. Abel said he could sell it, but sharing the profit would be difficult if they remembered Rio. It would only complicate matters. He also added that Rio's registration in Loni did not yet mean he was loyal to the Kingdom of Nightly. Other kingdoms could also try to lure him to their side. Linda Grid said that even if at least half of Abel's stories about Rio were true, he was truly unique. Abel began to get annoyed because he realized his friends did not fully believe him. Moreover, he noted that Rio might soon leave Lyon and move to another city. Rhea said that this would deprive Looney, and therefore the Kingdom of Night, of an important advantage. She added that it would be a real disaster if Rhea joined the Empire, but Abel replied that Rhea would not do that because the Empire did not suit him. Rhea asked what he meant, and Lin said that the Empire was the only rival of the kingdom. Abel explained, Rhea thinks that the name Empire does not sound cool. That's why he didn't like it there, and he stopped going there. They got a little confused and changed the subject several times, explaining that they only took on ordinary tasks they could not refuse because they avoided dungeons. Abel sincerely thanked his friends for their support. Rhea was glad that he returned safely, and they divided the reward among the four, asking him later to check his share. Abel was surprised and asked his friends to wait when he understood what was going on. He said it was unfair to divide among everyone since he was not there, and suggested dividing everything among three. But the friends did not agree because that was the custom in their company. Abel recalled that he also earned money and failed to take all the magic stones that dropped from monsters along the way. Abel said that he handed over the magical stones to the guildmaster for sale and wanted to share the profit with his friends. Stunned, they asked how he managed to obtain so many stones. Lin doubted whether Abel had helped any other group. Abel denied this and reminded her that he had already mentioned Weaver and the south side of the Evil Mountains. They defeated them on the way to Lun because leaving them was too dangerous. Lin was still in shock, so she clarified whether he really managed to defeat the Weavers and if Rio did it. She was confirmed that yes, he did. He told how Rio threw ice spears at their wings, and when the Weavers fell, he struck them in the eyes. Lynch could not understand why Rio aimed at the wyvern wings with ice spears. He checked again. There really were air barriers around them. This confirmed that the tactic worked. Lin said that even Master Hilarion could not possess such strong magic, and again confirmed that she knew only one person whose abilities could be compared to this. Abel recalled the infernal mage from the Empire. The legend says that he burned 1,000 kingdom soldiers with one strike. It is rumored that he defeated a wyvern with one strike and crushed the rebels who hid in the city. Smiling, Abel admitted that he would never want to fight a mage who controls fire. Abel seriously added that he himself would not want to fight Rio. He recalled how Rio easily created magic by inventing cool, special names for spells that suited his character. Also, Rio could cast spells instantly and almost silently, so his abilities were truly impressive. Abel admitted that looking at Rio's ice wall, he was not sure if he could break through it, even if he put all his strength into the strike. Rio could throw ice spears from behind the wall, and Abel could not come up with any strategy to win. Especially after what Rio said when he reached Lyon. He recalled how Rio took a fighting stance with a sword and boasted that he could win in hand-to-hand combat. Abel only sighed wearily. It was not funny to him at all. Even with magic, he could not imagine defeating Rio. Thanks to his close combat skills, Rio stood out advantageously among others. Together with the era of the Empire's prosperity, if you liked this video, subscribe to my channel. I was your host. See you in the next episode. Bye-bye. People realized that arguing with a mage is not the best idea. On the 5th day of the beginner's seminar about dungeons, someone suggested to Rio to ask this question. Rio thanked them and asked if there was any teleport that allows returning to the last cleared dungeon level. Everyone froze and looked at Rio, who stood with his mouth open in surprise. The instructor praised Rio for his knowledge and confirmed that some dungeons really have such mechanisms. He explained that in the Luna Labyrinth there is no such possibility, but in other games you can continue exploring from where you left off. He admitted that he did not know the technical details, and Rio thanked him and said that everything was fine. After the seminar, a man with an angry look was walking ahead of Rio. Rio was confident that he had correctly guessed the absence of teleportation in the Luna dungeon, and this pleased him. One man, surprised, praised him, but Rio shyly replied that it was just a minor detail. Suddenly the gates loudly slammed and opened, revealing a fortified room with iron bars. The instructor explained that monsters break free every few years, so the bars were installed to prevent them from escaping to the city. He told about the double gates, noting that everyone who entered was recorded, name, date, and time of entry, and if someone did not return, they were considered missing. The instructor confirmed that he had recorded the names of all the students and the time of their entry, officially documenting their presence. Rio noticed something strange nearby. The mud was trembling. He calmed the man when he saw that he was nervous. Rio approached closer and advised Amon to breathe deeply. Amon said he felt a little better after that. Although Amon was still pale, Rio assured him that everything would be fine since they were together. They passed through the gates and descend dark stairs to the dungeon. The man's bag became hard and started to fall down. When everyone reached the first floor, someone remarked that it was very spacious here. The instructor explained that only weak monsters wander on the first floor, so exploring is safe, but if someone does not return within 2 hours, the person is considered missing and temporarily not allowed back. Rio and the man walked side by side, keeping their weapons ready. Suddenly Rio sends gifts and Amon begins to panic. Rio calmly said that the target would be here in a minute. He intended to freeze her with ice magic so the man could attack with his sword. He assured the man that everything would be fine if they managed to stop this creature before it attacked. When they went further into the dark cave, they heard a noise. A soldier appeared, whom Rhea recognized from a book. The monster lunged forward, but stopped right in front of the heroes. Rio noticed that it was not spitting acid, so the best thing was to attack from the flank and aim for the head. The man nodded, understood, and moved aside. Looking at Rio, the man promised himself to do everything in his power. Rio began to conjure ice magic and announced that he would attack now. He stretched out his hand and began to recite his spell. Water bubbles appeared over the soldier's armor, and Rio again summoned ice to strike. Countless icy spears fall from above and pin the creature to the ground. At the same moment, Rio shouted for Almond to go around the ant from the side and cut off its head. The man quickly agreed to rush to the side of the creature. The swordsman quickly struck and cut off the ant's head. Rio raises his hands up in victory, rejoices, while Ammon just stands and cannot understand what just happened. The moon was delighted, watching the defeated soldier on the hunt, and loudly shouted to Rio that he had succeeded. Rio praised him, saying that he did an excellent job. Approaching the man, Rio offered to take the magical stone of the ant as a trophy for his first victory in the dungeon. The man could not believe it and asked if Rio was serious, to which he confirmed, explaining that this is how adventurers receive rewards in dungeons. Almant said he would remember this and asked if they should return to the meeting place. Rael explained that slugs eat defeated monsters, clean the dungeon, and think that their success gives them confidence. Both joyfully raised their fists, celebrating the victory over the ant soldier during their first dungeon expedition. The man noted that he was able to deliver the decisive blow only because Rio immobilized the monster. Rio praised his swordsmanship and asked him not to be modest. Nils added that it does not matter who did what, the main thing is that there is a reason to celebrate. After eating and resting, Edo and Nils said their team would explore the dungeon for 2 more days and asked the boys about their plans. Mont replied that he wanted to continue exploring and gathering groups for expeditions, and inquired whether it was easy to find volunteers to join the team here. He felt a little uneasy at the thought of joining with strangers, while Rio silently pondered something. After this, Rio turned to the man and asked if he wanted to go together to the 3rd level of the dungeon. Frilled immediately agreed and decided to join Rio's team. I wonder why ants appeared on the 1st floor, where bats usually live. Nils said he had seen ants there before. Edo recalled that over the past 6 months, GIL had received reports of ants appearing on the 1st floor. It was reported that ants appeared on the 1st and 2nd floors of the dungeon. Nils wondered why this was happening. Edo recalled that this had happened to them before, and the dungeon had also remained unexplored then. Abel approached the table where the group was talking and explained. The ants appeared because they dug tunnels to make it easier to move between floors, and Riot added that it was not right for experienced players to tease newcomers. Abel insisted that he was simply answering honestly. He asked if they were Rio's roommates, introduced himself, and joked that Rio was strong but had quirks in his character. Rio replied that if Abel wanted to anger him with these talks, he succeeded, and Nils wondered if he had heard the name Abel somewhere before. Nils suddenly remembered that Abel was the same swordsman with the red sword. He stood up, greeted him, and gladly extended his hand for a handshake. Abel agreed, encouraged Nils to try his best, but emphasized that the main thing was to survive, and then shook his hand. Rio noticed how effortlessly Abel shared wise advice and shook everyone's hands, and wondered if that was why people liked him so much. Abel said he had been delayed on the previous task and had only recently returned. Lynn saw Abel and shouted that she had found his hideout. Ray reminded him that they needed to go to the overseer. Irritated, Abel said he was not hiding but just helping the newcomers. Lynn apologized to Rio, said she needed to take Abel, and asked Warren to help her. Warren reached out to Abel, but he irritably said he could go on his own. Lena apologized again, explaining they had guild matters. Rio replied that everything was fine. In the background, Warren saw Abel pulling him along. Abel shouted that Rio was a traitor and demanded Warren not ignore him and let go. Everyone at the table stared in shock at the mess, and Rio silently smiled. One man said that it was a wonderful show, and Nils's eyes sparkled with joy. Exclaimed how wonderful Abel is. In the dungeon, the moon had clearly visible double protective grills on the 1st floors. Descending to the 2nd floor, torches lit up on the walls. Rio ordered his ice spears to attack, nailing the beast to the ground from below. The man prepared his sword to attack the motionless creatures. He raised the lantern closer to the defeated beasts, and Rio walked behind. Once again, they highly appreciated the man's excellent work and thanked him after a month. Rio suggested conducting the next fight like this. The man himself would face the beast. He said that the opponent is stronger without injuries, so he would just injure the wolf's front paws. The man agreed with the plan. the man asked Rio if he was sure about it. Rio was surprised why the man thanked him for training together, but asked if that was enough for him. Rio reassured him and said not to worry, noting that the man's fighting style resembled Abel's style. He asked if the man had learned from someone in his village. The man was surprised by the comparison, but answered yes. The man said he had learned from a former adventurer from his village named Grandpa Akira. He had received education at a famous martial arts school and always worked diligently on his farm. He apologized, saying that was all he remembered. Rio added that a strong foundation helps one become strong, like Abe. While they were passing through the second floor of the dungeon, one of the men asked where Rio, being a mage, knew so much about martial arts. Recalling his training with the legendary mentor, Rio said that the teacher guided him, although he had his own approach, so his knowledge remained limited. The man wondered how Rio could be both a skilled swordsman and a mage at the same time. But note, Rio did not always carry a sword with him. Rio took out the sword and showed it to the man. The swordsman was surprised when he saw how, in the dim light of the dungeon, his sword began to glow faintly. He asked about it, and Rio explained that the sword was given to him by his teacher. This sword was specially made for water mages. Examining the blade, the man realized it was made of ice and noted that only a water mage could use it. He said he had never seen anything like it, noticing two smaller wolves approaching. The man was ready for battle. The wolves sensed their presence and rushed at the pair. Rio said he had won one of the wolf's hind legs, which allowed the man to strike. He released a stream of water and threw two small ice spears at the wolves. One wolf was hit by a flying strike, and the other had spears thrust into its hind legs. The wolves retreated, coming to their senses, but the wounded one, bleeding and breathing heavily, glared fiercely at the man. The man looked straight into the eyes of the wounded wolf, which was slowly approaching in a fighting stance. Watch carefully what happens behind when they collide. He noticed that the man's style left the opponent no chance to attack, but he worried whether he had enough endurance. Rail believed that Tima Minor could be improved with training, as endurance is something easy to develop. Ria realized that since he left the Rondel forest, he had never trained to run and use magic simultaneously. The man, breathing heavily, reported that he had defeated the wolf, and Rio greeted him with a smile. Rio created an ice barrier around himself and others from floor to ceiling to protect everyone. He explained that the ice barrier was very strong, so the beasts could not break it and could rest peacefully. The man fainted, but afterward began to breathe more easily. He was advised once again not to rush, not to overexert himself, and was offered water. More calmly, the man noted that the barrier was so thin that it was almost invisible. Rial explained that the ice becomes cloudy due to impurities in the water and air, and that is exactly what people expect. He said that pure water can form transparent ice even without magic, but this barrier was created precisely thanks to spells. The man admired the wonders of water magic, and Rio believed that in this way he was helping to improve the reputation of water mages. The man admitted that he did not think fighting opponents who constantly move would be so exhausting, and once again asked if he had already fought wild beasts. One man said that he always fought monsters in a group when several people attack one creature. Rio said that fighting alone is much harder and more stressful than in a team. He also noted that this man's fighting style quickly exhausts him. He suggested improving his technique to avoid injuries and work more on endurance. He advised running to increase endurance and training strikes to strengthen arms and shoulders. Hemin says that his mentor ordered him to perform certain exercises and poses daily. Ria responds that thanks to regular discipline and adherence to these sessions, great success can be achieved. He says that for a long time he traveled with Abel and noticed that although he had a natural talent, Abel still woke up early every morning and trained. The man is surprised and impressed that even a genius like Abel trained hard every day. One man, disappointed in himself, admits that maybe he lacks the ability to become a swordsman. Rio shares advice from the strongest champion he knows. He said, "Talent is the ability not to give up, and true strength comes from perseverance." After that, he turns to the man and asks if he is ready to continue or wants to give up. The man confidently states that he will not give up and will go to the end. The next morning, when the sun rises, Rio is squatting by the bed in room 10, where all the other beds are empty. Outside, a man is running, breathing heavily and sweating profusely. Guido and Nils watch from afar as the man trains outside. The boy asks the girl if they will have to run too, and she answers that they will. Rio finishes getting ready and approaches the door. He notices that they are going out to the yard. Thanks to their dedication, he hums cheerfully. Then a heavy bag loudly falls on the table, and someone says that this should be enough. Nana mentions has an impressive collection of books and is interested in which books you want to buy. Rio Hiro is interested in books on alchemy. Luna has 2 libraries, one in the north and the other in the south. The southern one is located closer to the Adventurers Guild and has more books for beginners. In the bookstore, Rio notices 3 interesting books, but they can only be bought, not borrowed to read. Rio really wants to buy a book of alchemy recipes, but it costs 10 gold and he only has 5. Remembering the magic stones he received after defeating the wyverns, he decides to return to the guild. Rio hums cheerfully while walking the streets, pleased that he managed to sell the magic stones profitably, although he understands that earning money is not easy and requires effort. Realizing that you don't have to work for money gives an incredible feeling of satisfaction. Suddenly, Rio feels something strange and looks worried. Everyone on the street stops and watches the amazing solar eclipse with admiration. Rio is surprised, as he never imagined that such a thing could happen. The sun continues to darken, and someone nearby asks aloud what is happening. Suddenly, Rio feels something strange. He stops standing frozen right in the middle of the street. He wonders if he has ended up in a void or something similar in this fantasy world. The feeling is as if everything around has disappeared, and he is left alone in the void. Rio decides not to move to avoid attracting others' attention and chooses the only possible step. He exhales, and steam appears in the air. Using magic, he controls the moisture, creating something like a sonar. Eventually, the moisture recognizes that there is something or someone nearby. The detected figure looks like a human, but there are some differences. Rial begins an attack, summoning a powerful ice barrier with 10 layers. 10 huge walls of ice instantly rise before him. Suddenly, a voice rings in his head, asking, "Are you even human?" Rio understands that what broke his icy barrier is truly very strong. Underwater, the voice sounded very close. The voice will sound again, praising Rio and calling him a true fine fellow. Rio stayed in place and listened carefully thanks to his echolocation sense to anticipate what might happen next. The source of the voice turned out to be a demonic woman with horns. Someone praised Rio's ice magic, calling it very powerful. Rio imagined her and wondered if she was a demon. A great loud wave of fire swept towards him. He doubted that he could stop it. Rio created an ice barrier to protect himself, and the woman just smiled and released her magic. In a few seconds, Rio wondered if the attack was already over. His defense crumbled, and it surprised him greatly. And then the aerial spear flew straight into his heart. He hit him so hard that he flew several meters away. Rio sighed with relief, thinking, that was a close call. The woman stepped closer and looked at him in surprise as her airborne spear could not pierce him. She noticed that his cloak, apparently received from the king of the Fae, could have saved him, but he himself also held well in battle. She said that she must kill him herself, showing that she intended to take his life. Rio swiftly drew his sword with incredible speed. She appeared before him, raising her sword for a deadly strike. Rio barely managed to dodge, almost having no time to react, as the rival already began the next attack. They fought fiercely with swords, the woman smiling as she parried Rio's blows. During the duel, they simultaneously used magic. Their powers collided, exploded, and threw both backward. The woman used the pause in the fight to praise Rio's for his quick spellcasting, jokingly calling him a real monster. Rio responded indignantly that he did not want her to call him that. Realizing that Rio understood her, she immediately decided he was very dangerous. After another explosion, Akuma promised to kill him, and they began fighting with swords again. Rhea wondered if she had already tried to kill him before. During the clash, he created an ice spear and threw it at her. The woman easily deflected the spear. But Rio took advantage of the moment and summoned numerous ice spears around himself, but it did not help. They look at each other while the fog from his water magic dissipates. She teased Rio, asking if that was all he was capable of. To this, he replied that it was still far from over. Rio attacked Akuma with a continuous stream of ice spears. Then they fired streams of caustic water. She created a protective barrier and stopped these attacks, using all her water magic. Rio summoned rain that flooded the entire city and poured directly on Akuma. The woman, pleased that she managed to stop Rio's attacks, stood under the rain. She felt something strange in the falling water when Rio said, "Boil." Akuma screamed in pain as the rain began to burn her skin, scorching the flesh. She let out a loud shriek. She focuses on her counterattack. A huge explosion erupted around Akuma. Rio had to retreat so that he would not be caught. Breathing heavily and tired, Rio looked at Akuma. The woman said that her time was up, and added that she had not enjoyed a fight like this for a long time. Rio demanded that she leave. Seeing her recover, she noticed that Rio also enjoyed the fight and admitted that she could not control the space created by the eclipse. Ria looked at her tiredly. The woman introduced herself as Lena Eureka Albuquerque and asked his name. But he called her Akuma. She was shocked and said that she had to destroy him, even at the cost of her own life, because he had discovered her true nature. Introducing herself as Leonora, she said that time was short and he was not so easy to overcome, said goodbye, promising to meet again. Rio, clearly not wanting a new meeting, made this clear to her. Leonora told him to stop, warning that in the future he would meet her or similar enemies again, and advised not to risk his life in order to stay alive for these battles. He promised that next time he would become stronger and definitely defeat him. After that, he said goodbye to Rio. As if waking up, Rio found himself exactly in the part of the city where he was before falling into the void. He wondered if he had really returned and sat down on a bench. He sat down to comprehend everything that had happened. With a sigh of relief, he realized he was still alive. He recalled how he had almost died in a battle with the killer eagle who could block magic. But this time Leonora easily dodged and shattered his icy spears. A sudden pain in his chest reminded him of how she once struck him with a spear from the air. And he thought he had been injured. He thanked his master for the cloak, as he was sure it was what saved him from a serious wound, although the cloak itself was not even damaged. He touched the painful spot and immediately regretted it. Watching Leonora's attacks, he wondered if it was magic, since they were extremely strong and she acted lightning fast. As if she used air magic to become faster, he noticed she said there was little time left. It seemed related to the solar eclipse. They realized that the space for the fight appeared only then and harmed only them, while the city remained unharmed. He admitted that much of this event was unclear to him. Without wasting time, Rio decided to buy a book on alchemy, return to his room, and engage in research in Kamasa. Even his mentor knew nothing about them. He remembered how he asked Abel, who only knew about demons but had heard nothing about Akam, and he thought, if even Abel, probably the third son of a noble family, doesn't know this, finding answers will not be easy. Rio decided to buy this book and go to the dormitory. Later they enter a room that turned out to be empty. He wondered if his roommates were still training. Neil, breathing heavily because of the heat in Florida, said that everyone here would be better off if they did not get so tired. Five mocked him, saying there was nothing more pathetic than the whining of a defeated dog. To this, he replied that it sounds good coming from those who attack from around the corner. One man asked if they really thought that monsters would warn them or stop when they went to rest, emphasizing that one must always be on guard. Nearby, Rio noticed something strange on the left. A man approached Nils and said that he should be thankful it was not a real fight. Nils cursed at him, but Rio noted that the one who loses vigilance himself is to blame. Spears suddenly emerged from the ground, trying to hit the men in the backs. The man near Nils noticed how his friends were hit. He approached confidently and honestly told the man what happened, explained that he used ice spears to strike his friends from behind. The man wanted to curse Rio, but he interrupted him and said that one must never lose vigilance. He sarcastically asked if he should have warned before the attack, since the man told Nils about the monsters. Rio said that this was the consequence of their carelessness. Nils muttered that he really did not like this situation. They said that they used to run every morning, but now they would do it on weekends to conserve strength. Rio addressed the man who was still standing stunned. And Nils recognized him as Dan for room number 4. Noticing Dan, Rio asked what he would do next. Frozen in surprise along with his friends, Dan could have fled from shame. Instead, Dan drew a sword and promised not to retreat, and to attack without hesitation. Rio dodged to the side and struck Dan with the hilt of his sword directly in the ribs. Dan curled up in pain, and Rio turned back to his friends. Rio Fahid caused Dan more pain with his fists through the armor, but the hilt also inflicted significant damage. He remembered that he had been on the brink of death before, and said that the adrenaline from that fight still hadn't worn off. He asked Edo to treat his wounds, and showed her the bruise he got in the battle with Akuma. Edo noticed that the injury looked serious, but the bones are not broken, although the blow was very strong. She said that if the blow had landed closer to the heart, it could have been fatal, even if a healing spell was used. Rhea said that this is what survival on the edge looks like, and thanked for them staying alive. When Edo asked what he was fighting against, Rio smiled and said he would tell the others together. Then he was still groaning from the pain after Rio's blow, very close by. Rio remembered how Leonora used to corner her, but now she easily defeats experienced adventurers, which contrasts greatly with her past in Serta. Later in the brothel, Nils thanked Rio. He says that he arrived on time and thereby saved them from humiliation. One man noticed that this mage moves very quickly. Rio replied that modern mages really do know how to move like that, and Nils asked her not to tease the man. The company laughed and relaxed in the bath. In the central province of the Kingdom of Nightly, the largest city on the southern border was Lun, and the Adventurers Guild dining hall. Nils said that he, his husband, and Edo were assembling a team for a dungeon expedition tomorrow and invited Rio, but he apologized and declined. Rio talked about the main plans that exist in the city. Nils said he expected this, since Rio immediately received rank D and quickly defeated Dan, confirming his roommate's suspicions about the great difference in strength. Dungeon raids were easier when stronger adventurers were nearby, but this added tension for both the strong and the weaker participants. The guild advised forming groups with participants of roughly equal strength. However, Rio was an exception. He was immediately stronger than ordinary beginners. Even the guild did not expect someone like him to come to the dormitory. The next day, on Monday, his friends truly said goodbye to him before setting off to the dungeon. He decided to train his endurance and better control magic by running around the city walls of Loans. He remembered how Leonora cast stronger spells, although he himself spoke spells much faster than her. He aimed to cast spells faster and more accurately, focused on developing his strengths, and diligently trained his weaknesses until they too became his advantage. But still, he believed that Lee and Nora were significantly more agile than him. He recalled how she instantly covered dozens of meters, probably using wind magic. Rio wondered if he could replicate this using water magic. He considered the option of using water jets from his legs, but he needed to figure out how to move forward using his back without injuring himself. He thought he could try releasing an air jet from his neck or along his entire spine, and also freeze the ground beneath him to slide forward. He calculated that he could currently handle 256 water jets. To test his idea, Rio released a water jet from his back, but everything went wrong. And he fell, admitting his defeat to someone or something. He thought he might not be ready yet, but he managed to launch 10 24 jet planes, which gave him hope. Meanwhile, in the dungeon, Nils told Edo that hunting goblins together with another swordsman was much faster. These giant creatures were easier prey than wolves because they moved more slowly. Nils suggested taking a break and advised dissolving some salt in water and drinking it. One of the men recalled that they had already talked about salt yesterday but couldn't remember what it was for. It had nothing to do with performances or healing magic. Nils explained that it was an ancient village tradition. This is how locals restore their strength after a bath. Ido, worried about Amon's wounds, joined Nils to rest and noticed that the fight was happening very close by. Nils noted that goblin archers shouldn't be on the 5th floor, and this made him uneasy and doubtful about whether to proceed further. Ido agreed, decided to return earlier, but was satisfied that this time the loot was more, even when divided among 3. In the Adventurers Guild, Nils shyly greeted 9. He asked if they finished early, and Nils began to answer awkwardly. Nils confirmed, then tried to praise 9, but Edo intervened. Explained to 9 that they returned earlier because on the 5th floor, a goblin archer showed her a magic stone. 9 was sure it was an arrow from the goblin archer when she examined it. 9 said she would inform the guildmaster and make changes to the records, as such reports are rare. Nils wanted to talk to 9 again, but Edo interrupted him, saying it was better to sell their magic stones while the guildmaster processed the documents. But he did not come, and he invited the visitor inside. On the 9th floor, a girl appeared and reported that a goblin archer was seen on the 5th floor. The guildmaster was so surprised that he froze and asked her to repeat. He said that the archer should only appear from the 10th floor, and 9 confirmed this report. He turned to the sign and asked which venture groups of Class B are currently in Luna. 9 listed Crimson Swords and White Brigade, and when the guild leader asked about the Fells Brigade, she replied. She confirmed that they returned 2 days ago and are still in the city. He ordered her to ensure both groups are in the guild within an hour. Abel noted that even the White Brigade was called and admitted that he finds it hard to deal with them. Rio was surprised how Abel could say that, considering their childhood friendship. Lin noticed that Abel constantly complains, and he should sometimes take an example from Warren, who is silent. The band Crimson Swords reached the door of the guild master, knocked, and heard an invitation to enter. Captain Phelps from Highland and the deputy captain of the White Brigade greeted Abel when they entered. Havel responded to the greeting, but felt that he was acting a bit tense. The The guild master said that the heroes probably already guessed why they were called. He thanked them for coming and explained, "The matter concerns goblin archers on the 5th floor." The hero asked how sure he was about this, and the guild master replied that he was absolutely certain. He showed the magic stone of the goblin archer and told about 3 adventures of Frank, among which was the story about the archer and how they fought goblins on the 5th floor. Abel said that it was good that even an F-level group managed to defeat the goblins with the help of the archer. The guild master clarified that it was Nils' team and praised Nils as a prudent and intelligent adventurer. With good prospects, Havel asked if this was the group of neighbor Rio. The guild master confirmed that it was Nils, Edo, and another man. Everyone was surprised that Abel knew them. Abel said that he met them not long ago, but believes that they will become true adventurers who know how to value survival. Ben Phelps, leader of the White Brigade, interrupted the conversation and asked what was expected of them. When it was confirmed that there were goblin archers on the 5th floor, Phelps inquired what the guild master wanted. He asked the White Brigade and the Crimson Swords to inspect the dungeon and check if a new large invasion was being prepared. When the number of monsters sharply increases and stronger creatures appear on the upper floors, the guild master immediately gave 100 gold coins and promised another 200 after their return. Abel asked again if it was necessary to check only for the presence of a large wave. The guild leader confirmed this and said that if they noticed a strong splash, they should immediately return. He suggested making a double barrier to prevent monsters from entering the city, then defending with the help of knights, and only after that going on the counterattack. He asked them to come to the dungeon the next morning and temporarily not to let new adventurers in. The guards at the entrance were to stop everyone else, and he asked if they agreed to these conditions. Havel said that the Red Swords agreed and confidently support the White Brigade. On Tuesday, shortly after 9 in the morning, someone inquired whether their report helped to learn anything new. The man with nails and Edo said that the guild posted an announcement based on their report. The man wondered where Rio was, recalling that he mentioned the library. The guild announcement stated that dungeon travels are suspended from Tuesday until further instructions. In Lewon, sometime after 9, on a gloomy Tuesday, everything was calm. Rio went to the Southern Library. He wanted to find books about Akuma and learn more about his new world. Meanwhile, the man, Edo, and Nell approached the guild's bulletin board and noticed that the dungeon entrance was suspended. Adus assumed that new information appeared after their report. In the dungeon, Abel met with Phelps. They looked at the number of people and confirmed that only half of the participants from the White region had arrived, not counting 20 or more adventurers of rank C and above, while all those of rank D and below remained in the city on standby. Abel glanced sideways in surprise and noticed the guild master, who reminded them that just yesterday he said he would wait by the dungeon entrance to immediately make the necessary decisions after their return. He called them to hurry, but Abel asked for a minute more. Feeling anxious about the 1st floor, I asked Lynn to check it using wind magic. Lynn agreed and cast the spell upward. Shortly after this, she reported that there were already more than 100 monsters on the 1st floor alone. Phelps shouted that a great invasion had begun, and the guildmaster ordered everyone to run to the top of the stairs and urgently call the Knights of Barracks for help. When everyone had passed through the door, the heavy metal door slammed shut, blocking the stairs. One of the men made sure that everyone had reached the top and the entrance was securely closed. But you notice with fear how terrible claws bend nearby, while a multitude of goblins fill the halls. A fierce battle began when Goblin roared terribly. Abel commanded the battle from a distance, using magic and bows, while Vanguard covered the mages and archers, protecting them from enemy spells and arrows. The hero's arrows hit the target, destroying many goblins. At the Adventurers Guild, Deviatka announced that on Amgaphon, the Great Tai brought monsters to the city and allowed ranged attacks to begin. Archers lined up along the walls near the dungeon gates, prepared their arrows, and the 9th reminded everyone not to forget to drink water. Abel noticed that most of the enemies were goblins and a few archers, so he warned that the battle might drag on. Lynn said they would have to defeat them all to reach the bosses. Abel noticed that only goblins were nearby, who did not stop until their leader died, but he did not appear. Suddenly, a goblin mage appeared, and someone worried that magical attacks would begin now. The warrior noticed the guild master and called him to the northern wall of the dungeon, where the fighters had just engaged in a skirmish with the goblins. Seeing this, the guild master wondered, had the knights run out of arrows? He encouraged the knights, saying that together they would easily defeat the goblin horde. The earth mage cast a spell and raised a stone wall to protect Felt from the blows. The mage declared that the goblins would soon be defeated, and did so with. Next, Goblin mages. From exhaustion, Felt cut the beast in half with a spear and barely stayed on his feet. Managed to thrust his sword into the ground right in the middle of the goblin horde. Nearby, Warren tossed a goblin into the air with his shield. Abel smiled slightly, having defeated another goblin archer. Calls on everyone to endure a little longer. Goblin. Before Abel lost his essence, the distant noise was becoming louder and louder. Felt stopped and looked carefully at the end of the first floor, where 3 giant goblins appeared, and this greatly alarmed her. After defeating 3 goblin generals and numerous ordinary goblins, it became clear that somewhere in the depths of the dungeon the Goblin King was hiding. Goblin Kings appeared once every few decades, led thousands, and could destroy entire cities. There were over 10,000 goblins in the dungeon, so it was quite possible that a king had appeared there, although this had never happened before. Abel told Feltz that he did not know how strong the king was, but wanted to first defeat the generals, and only then meet the king himself. Abel said he would deal with 1 goblin general himself, entrusted another to the leader of the white squad, and the third to the rest of the group. Abel quickly jumped forward and struck the goblin general almost at point-blank range. But this blow barely touched the enemy. The mage threw a fireball between Abel and the beast. Abel interrupted the close combat and stepped back to calmly consider his next move. The goblin general fiercely charged at him, but he managed to deftly dodge to the side. Feltz, adjusting tactics together with Abel, smiled at him in a battle-ready way. Both were getting real pleasure from the fight. The leader of the White Brigade spun into a swift attack on his goblin general, but in a moment, both noticed something strange happening behind on the first floor. Abel shouted to everyone to duck as a huge white lightning struck directly at the 3 goblin generals, hitting them from the waist up. The warriors crouched and covered their ears as an arrow roared past them. Someone asked if that was the Goblin King when a huge monster ran out at the people. Abel wondered if they wanted to kill us along with their generals, since the attack was aimed only at our group, without any spells. This hinted at very strong magic. Deciding not to retreat, he shouted that he and Feltz would rush the monster together. When they ran closer to the Goblin King, he suddenly attacked them, which greatly frightened them. Abel raised his sword at an angle to block the monster's strike, straining to hold back its assault. When Feltz saw he was noticed, he immediately decided to attack the monster's hand with his spear during its attack. When the monster roared, Abel did not take his eyes off it. They continuously struck the monster together, fighting with persistence and determination. The beast was badly hurt by the blows of the 2 experienced warriors. In one careless moment, Abel stumbled and fell, cursing in anger. And then the Goblin King saw an opportunity to attack, but Abel loudly shouted Feltz to duck. And the leader of the White Brigade rushed to him, loudly calling his name. Abel activated his most powerful shadow combat technique. Galvin rushed forward, preparing to strike. When the opponent approached, Abel used his perfect piercing sword technique. He struck the beast directly. He shouted Lin to attack while he held it. From afar, Lin and another person saw the giant monster that Abel was fighting. Abel used absolute shadow again, and from his move, even the wind and dust covered the distant metropolis. In the dungeon, a large dark stain remained on the floor, frightening everyone. And Lin just froze in surprise. A goblin approached with a dark stick protruding from his chest. He fell to his knees, unable to do anything. Felt approached closer and saw the monster kneeling in a dark puddle. Abel could not believe his eyes when he saw this. The tavern was full of people who were joyfully raising their mugs and loudly celebrating something, although Rio had no idea what exactly. A man noticed Rio and called him over. Rio approached, and Nils said he would eat enough to last him a whole week. The man greeted Rio, happy that he came at the start of the party, and invited him to boldly help himself to food and drinks. A delicious plate of food was placed in front of Rio. It was a special dish from the guild. Nils, as always energetic and a bit late, quickly suggested Rio take a mug and plate from the table to sit down and enjoy the treat without shame. Rio still did not understand, so he finally asked what exactly they were celebrating. He was explained that today the Great Wave had occurred, a rare event he had heard about at a seminar, which happens once every few years. Then Rio realized everyone was celebrating having survived the Great Wave. He just wanted to manage to take a plate for himself before Nils started continuing his story. Soon rumors spread throughout the city about Abel's incredible combat skills. He was equally skilled with both bow and sword, and almost single-handedly defeated the Goblin King. Ray was curious why Abel had only almost defeated the king. Nils explained that the final blow was delivered by Lin, but that happened only because Abel pinned the monster down and called everyone to attack. Rio noted that it would have been a disaster if Abel had been hurt, assuming it was a wind spell. Edo, who was dozing near Nils, heard Wilkins say, "It's Bullet Rain, a rare and powerful spell." Nils looked at Edo in surprise, and Edo immediately fell asleep again after the hearty meal. Rai remarked that Bullet Rain sounded cool, and Nils agreed, adding that it was like dozens of invisible blades falling around, and you'd be lucky if none of them touched you. Someone said that Abel avoided them thanks to his combat skills. Abel himself suddenly appeared next to the guys, striking a heroic pose. Rio asked about martial arts, and he was told about sword techniques, for example, the Absolute Shadow, which allows dodging even magical attacks or strikes from a distance. Rio thought the name was very cool and fitting, and expected someone to laugh at it. Rio said that Nils was highly praised for his heroism, which embarrassed Nils, who tried to hide, but Abel emphasized that without Nils and his friends, who quickly handed arrows to the archers, they could have lost. Nils stood proudly, barely containing his joy. Abel said they would have won more easily if Rio had been there, and asked where he had gone. Rio replied he was in the library, and joked that he hadn't stolen Abel's moment of victory. Abel asked him to be quiet. Lin and Rio appeared. They said they found Abel because they knew he would be with Rio, worrying about him. Abel was embarrassed and began to deny, saying he just remembered that it would be easier with Rio in the fight. Ria conveyed a message from the guildmaster. Tomorrow at noon, you must come to the Margrave, and Abel must also be present. Rio T said it was a great reward for Abel's brilliant play. Abel insisted that the decisive strike was made by Lin, but she asked him to stop attributing the credit to her. Lin explained that her spell only worked because Abel pressed the goblin with a sword. After that, she turned to Rio and asked if he could really create tall walls of ice from afar, as Abel claimed. Smiling, Rio confirmed that he can create ice walls up to 40 meters high right in the sky above him. Lin confusedly wanted to say something, but Ril interrupted her. He says that at first it was difficult, and he had to train a lot to learn to do it well. She was still in shock, cast a real glance aside, warning others to stop risky behavior. Among the youth, a loud quarrel broke out, something fell to the floor, and they called someone to wipe it up. 5 days passed after the great battle of the tides, when a man, passing by a group of 5-legged creatures on the street, immediately recognized them as a scientific team. At the guild headquarters, Nils stood in front of the task board, upset that it was empty. 9. They apologized again, explaining that in the last 2 days all missions of ranks E and F have already been completed, and the procurement department has temporarily suspended issuing new ones. Nils, stumbling slightly, loudly told Nani that it was not her fault, blamed the procurement department, and then thanked her for her efforts. Edo and another man appeared behind him just as Rio, a little shyly, approached to find out if there were any tasks and why there were none at the moment. They asked if Rio had gone shopping. He replied that he saw magic copper for alchemy training, but the procurement department did not sell it, so Rio decided to collect copper himself on the 5th floor of the dungeon, although he did not care that local shops no longer had it. One man inquired if magic copper was really on the 5th floor, and Nils wondered if it was too expensive. Rio replied that a piece the size of a fist was last sold for 500,000 florins, or 50 gold coins. Edo explained that due to tension between the guild and the alchemists, prices for magic copper in the city had risen sharply. Rio suggested the group take on a task, asking if they agreed to take it from him specifically. He said that magic copper could be found near an abandoned mine not far from the village of Russi. It was only half a day's walk. M1 promised to give each person 4 coins, plus 25 coins for a piece the size of a fist if everyone returned alive. The group gladly agreed, and M1 praised the deal. Rio calculated that this would be cheaper than buying directly and noted that it was not a guild task, so their rank would not increase, but they were fine with that. 3 friends set out for the mine. Rio could have gone alone, but decided to help his neighbors earn money because he already had enough and did not like giving away money for nothing. While they collected magic copper, Rio could train in alchemy using simple materials from the city. In the northern bookstore, unlike the southern one, they sold specialized books rather than general ones. Lin approached the special engraved door leading to the closed archive. Only Margraves, authorized persons, or those with rank B or hired adventurers are allowed to enter here. In the archives were kept secret materials. These were powerful spells of all elements and forbidden magic. After research, Lin concluded that such a spell does not exist. None of the known ones create distant ice walls. In the Central Kingdoms, a list of all spells and magical formulas was kept, even the one by which she defeated the Goblin King. Magic of such a level required experienced sorcerers because the spells could destroy even the mage himself, so access to it was restricted. However, Lin found no mentions of Ryo's combat spells that worked by pronouncing magical formulas. Anyone who has magical talent can use spells. With experience, a person moves from simple charms to more complex ones, first learning the basics, then tackling intermediate and advanced levels. But there is a special kind of magic that requires neither spells nor thoughts about Rio. She compares this magic to a version of explosive magic, but not with fire, rather with water, as a fire mage does. A famous fire sorceress who demonstrated such powerful spells that no one had seen before. She finds it hard to understand how magic can work without incantations, and the idea of original magic seems even stranger to her. From behind Lin appears a woman from the shadows and says that they have not seen each other for a long time. Lin begins to look around to see who could have approached so quietly. She quickly notices the long, thin sword hanging from the woman's belt. Then she notices Sarah, the only second-rank participant from Wing Group who is still in the city of Lu. Lin smiles and greets Sarah. The girl asks what Lin is doing in such an unusual place. Lin replies that she was conducting research but couldn't find anything. She also mentions that she heard Sarah was on a business trip from the capital. Sarah confirmed that she was indeed absent but returned yesterday. Then she said goodbye, saying she was hurrying to the library, which was already waiting for her. Feeling irritated, Lin decides it's better to go home. From room number 10 in the Adventurers Guild dormitory, the inner courtyard and training ground are clearly visible. While Nils, Ito, and Ammon were completing a task from Rio, our hero was testing new formulas and finally created his first antidote. As soon as the boy made his first antidote, suddenly someone nearby shouted loudly and ordered him to stop. Rio stops his work and cautiously turns his head, trying to understand why someone is shouting. Then we see Dan from room 1, who says that the girl clearly does not want the boys to touch her and asks them to leave her alone. One man grabs the young woman and says that she can serve them drinks. If she does well, maybe they will keep her with them while they are in town. Rio watches the events in the inner courtyard through a low window. He recognizes these men as knights trying to take advantage of the young girl. She recently became an adventurer and is about the same age as Ammon. He also notices Dan standing nearby. The men throw out a phrase that if she lives here, then she is probably a new and poor adventurer. They offer her their help and hint that she might spend the night with them. Although the girl refused, Rio hopes he won't have to. He understands that there are many places in the city where these men could find entertainment. They could easily go there, but here Dan can no longer stand it and shouts at them. The girl refused, so if they don't stop bothering her, they will get beaten. One of the knights turns to Dan and challenges him. Let him repeat what he just said. He lets go of the girl, who immediately runs to Dan and loudly declares that he will now show the travelers how to behave. Behind Dan, who shielded her with his body, stood 2 other adventurers. Knight draws his sword and says he does not intend to kill the boy, but only wants to teach him a lesson, and that Dan should be thankful for this. Dan, together with his partner, anxiously faces the knight. They prepare for the moment when the men will rush forward. Suddenly, Knight flips in the air and falls face down to the ground. Dan is stunned and cannot understand what just happened. Mike, swearing, tries to get up and orders the adventurer not to move. Getting up, he promises to teach him a lesson. But he falls again, this time on his back. One of the knight's comrades asks Dan what he did to their friend. Dan insists that he did nothing, explaining that the man simply fell to the ground by himself. Shaking with rage, the knight tries once more to get up and rush at Dan, but falls face first to the ground, unable to stay on his feet. Dan cannot believe his eyes. He watches as the man repeatedly tries to get up to attack, but each time falls back down. Mage friends as well as adventurers stand motionless, watching the strange scene unfolding before them in surprise, unable to understand what is happening. Rio calmly observes everything happening from his low window. Then Phelps, the leader of the White Brigade, steps forward and orders everyone to stop this spectacle. Dan immediately recognizes Phelps as Knight finally takes its place. He sharply asks who this man with long hair who just appeared is. Phelps replies that they are behaving very shamefully, yet have the audacity to call themselves Knights of Rome. They are reproached to be ashamed of their actions. The knight, furious beyond measure, protests, asking who this adventurer is to lecture him. Someone interrupts the knight and asks him to be silent. Phelps explains that this is not about who is an adventurer and who is a knight. It is about honor and dignified behavior. The knight boasts that no one dares to contradict the knights of the kingdom and threatens that if he wishes, he can expel the leader of the Adventurers Guild from the city. Phelps, leader of the White Brigade, admits that he is an adventurer, but at the same time a nobleman in the kingdom. He introduces himself as Phelps, a direct descendant of the Marcus Heinlein family. One night someone looks at the interlocutor in fear upon hearing the Heinlein surname, and he replies that the captain of the Royal Knights is Alex Heinlein. Phelps confirms that Alex Heinlein, the current head of the Marcus Heinlein family, is indeed his father. The knight who fell goes back to his comrades and shouts at them to stop disgracing the honor of the Royal Knights. And he ordered them to disappear from his sight immediately. The guys thanked the warrior and believed that now everything would be fine. He says there is no need to thank him because the knight's act made him very angry. He praises Dan for his courage and asks him to escort the girl back to her friends. Rio is still watching from a low window and sees the adventurers beginning to disperse. Phelps notices him in the window, asks if he is Rio, and Rio confirms that it is him. The warrior gladly welcomes Rio, introduces himself as the leader of the White Brigade, and says he heard about him from Abel. Learning that Rio can use unusual magic, Rio modestly replies that there is nothing special about it and Phelps should not pay attention to it. Phelps jokes in response that he saw that knight just rush at the adventurers and clumsily fall. Thanks to Rio's intervention, Phelps boasts in front of our hero and thanks him on behalf of all the adventurers of Lun. When Phelps wants to bow, Rio stops him, saying it is unnecessary. He and Dan have their own past, and even if he wanted to help directly, Dan still would not agree. Therefore, Rio acted discreetly. Phelps agrees, repeating Abel's words about Rio's uniqueness. Rio wonders what exactly Abel told others about him. The leader of the White Legion explains that Abel mentioned Rio during the Great Wave celebration. He notes that everything would have been much easier if Rio had been nearby. He adds that Abel rarely praises anyone like that, and it was thanks to Rio that the warrior remained alive and safely returned to the city. He saved the boat, as its loss would have been a real disaster for Lun. Phelps sincerely thanks Rio for helping the warrior survive and return. A woman appears in the doorway and tells the leader that it is almost time to leave. Phelps thinks that Rio apologizes, saying they need to go, but adds that he would have gladly talked more. As Rio watches Phelps leave, he admits that he also feels very tired. A joyful smile appears on Rio's face. He thinks about how both the woman who called the leader and the leader himself are very strong people, and he wonders, is it really normal for the heir of such a famous family to go on adventures?